All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Homefront Live. I am your host today, Reed Galen. It is 11:32 in the East and 8:32 in the West. Today, I am joined by Steve Schale, Florida man, golfer, political strategist, and all-around good guy. Steve, welcome back.
It's good to see you, Reed. I taking a few minutes off. I'm hosting all 10 of my nieces and nephews this week in North Carolina. So it's a busy week. It's good to talk a little politics for a few minutes here.
Oh, good. You're in the Tar Heel State. Whereabouts?
Waynesville, just outside of Asheville. So
Oh, beautiful. On the western side of the state.
absolutely. Hopefully, there's a really bright young Democrat over here named Zeb Smathers that hopefully one day will be the great hope of Mountain Country.
And how are things going over there? How's the recovery process happening?
Man, it's these are resilient people, as you know, folks that live in this part of the world. But it's rough, and frankly, I mean, some of the changes in the Trump administration and the way that FEMA money has flowed has really been a challenge, particularly in these small communities. And man, a lot of these small places, the biggest problem is they don't want to become sort of bougie tourist villas, and so, but without sort of the federal money to help them rebuild their infrastructure and rebuild their economy, a lot of them, that's what they're going to become. They're going to be, folks are going to sweep in and they're going to buy cheap real estate, and a lot of these communities will lose a lot of their soul, and that's the piece that I think a lot of folks are really worried about here.
Well, as someone who lived in a bougie resort town, I can tell you that it is a real thing. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and I
traffic,
mean,
traffic tends to be the number one concern, but the second is that when we moved here to this mountain town in Utah, the first thing one of a guy that we got to know here said, "Be part of your community," and I think
correct.
that's not what we're here to talk about. But the one thing that is really tough for small towns like you're talking about is that people come and they enjoy all of the parts of living there, great. But they don't understand the community ties, the history, the legacy, which again, listen, in a place where I've been 10 years and people are like, oh, 10 years, that's not even anything. But if you don't take the time and opportunity to get involved in the community and get to know the people who've known everything, then you're just basically a full-time tourist.
100%. I mean, we're lucky to play. My stepdad's family's from this part of the country, going back about 100 years. And where we ended up buying a little place up here, where one next door neighbor is a cop, the next door neighbor, other neighbors lived in the house for 70 years, and so it's sort of forced integration into the community. But you're right. It's and again, that's been the challenge on the recovery here, is just allowing these folks to these communities to have enough money to be able to rebuild the community that they want, not the community that a bunch of investors want.
Well, no, and I think that's right, and I think we're probably seeing that in other places like the Pacific Palisades or Altadena in Los Angeles or so many other parts of Florida where you live, right? Which is, if you have ready money and cheap land, you can build whatever you want, and hurricanes be damned.
I mean,
Otherwise,
Fort Myers Beach is not a wealthy place, even though it has the word beach in it. And it will be a very wealthy place one day. And that'll be fine for tax base and all that. But, post Ian, it will not be the same. And certainly, Reed, from spending time in the panhandle, that, those hurricanes reshape those communities in radical ways, a lot of which is folks who used to be able to afford to live on the beach now live 30 miles inland.
right. And then that's a cascading effect, right? Because even 30 miles inland, especially in a state like Florida, doesn't necessarily doesn't immunize you from floods or anything else, right? So,
Absolutely.
um, all right. So we are here to talk about, though, Steve, that you just put together a pretty comprehensive survey of 21 counties across 10 states that Democrats need to do better in to win a state or large Democratic area. And you sent this to me, I think last week, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get to you, but let's go through this, and I'll try and post it in the chat here. But give us a sense of why you chose these 21 counties, what you found, and what it is you think that Democrats, the big D Democratic Party, needs to do to win in these places.
Yeah, I mean, so Reed, when you and I, had this conversation a few months ago on your podcast, I mean, as we talked about, the thing that's worried me is not what happened in 2024; it's what's happened since 2012. That in a
Right.
lot of these communities, the trajectory has been in one direction, and it's not been good for Democrats. And I think we keep sort of band-aiding the problem here and there, and you think things are fine because of 2022 and Roe v. Wade, or Biden in 20, and but the trajectory isn't great. And so I think the thought was here was really sort of twofold. One is let's take a look at an interesting cross section of counties in states. Every one of these states has been on the map more than once in the last four presidentials. So you take the seven swing states in 2024, and you add some Florida, some Iowa, some Ohio in there. And you take a
Right.
big cross section of counties, uh, largely counties that have gone the wrong direction. And yeah, you can take places like Miami-Dade County, which is a place that went from, Clinton plus 30 to Trump plus 12
Right.
in just 8 years, to a place like Macomb County, that Obama won twice and Trump won three times, to a place like, say, Wayne County or Cuyahoga County, Detroit, or Cleveland, where Democrats still win by large margins, but nowhere near the margins that they won by, say, under Obama.
Right.
And trying to figure out kind of what are the consistencies about how people view the two political parties. What are the consistencies and the things that people want to see in a political party, sort of the aspirational political party? And
Right.
then kind of like, what are the types of, this conversation we've been having as a party about what the future looks like for us, what's the right sort of frame, like actually put that to the test, to ask these folks in these 21 counties, hey, here are the things people are saying, and tell us what you think. And we actually did an interesting exercise you saw, Reed, where we had people sort of rate these various sort of statements about the party taking on oligarchs or Trump, or the abundance frame, or you name it, and had them highlight the words in those frames that they liked. And what was interesting is, I mean, and again, like, just one more thing on the frame. I mean, the 21 counties we got to a little bit by, just some of it just straight data. There are some places that are just, used to be competitive that aren't.
Right.
There's some places where the margins have dropped a lot. There's some places that are obvious. Clark County in Nevada, obviously, Maricopa in
Right.
Arizona. And then, we actually, I called some operatives in a few states and said, hey, what places are interesting to you? So I guess how we ended
Right.
up with Cherokee County in Georgia. Had a Georgia guy say, hey, I think it's sort of interesting, the growth there, margins getting bigger, yada yada yada. And so, it was interesting. I mean, not surprising, the Democratic Party favorability was pretty shitty. Some of that was a function of Democrats being mad at Democrats. Um, but what was interesting, when we asked people what they wanted to see in a political party versus, how they viewed the two political parties. I mean, the reality is that the things people want to see in, a political party and what people think of us do not match up hardly in any way whatsoever. And that's the challenge we got to fix going forward.
Yeah, and so you made a note too, excuse me, in your presentation that this isn't just about 2026 or 2028, but also 2032. And I think, just to take an aside for a second, we're seeing a lot of talk right now about congressional districts and gerrymandering, and in mid-session gerrymandering and all these other things. And Texas, look, they've done this before. A couple of guys actually went to prison for it. Tom DeLay, I mean, just to think back on all these things. Now we've got Gavin Newsom out in California saying we're going to do it. Although, let me just say for everybody, like, I helped pass Prop 11 in 2008, which is the redistricting commission. It's a lot of work. They got to do it in a very, very short amount of time, and it's a whole other thing. So it is not a panacea, but even if Governor Newsom were able to do that, Steve, and get, let's say, 5 to 7 extra congressional districts, one, you don't necessarily guarantee you're going to win all those.
Right.
Second, it doesn't solve the problem that I think you're also looking down the road at, which is both states like California and New York are also going to lose 4 congressional districts each, probably, to places like Texas and your home state of Florida. So what are you going to do when that shift happens? Because you can't just give up, because those aren't just congressional districts. It makes it harder to win a U.S. Congressional majority, but it also makes it harder to win a presidential majority.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we talked about this last time we did the podcast. I mean, the sort of the vaunted blue wall, the Clinton states, plus Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, plus the one congressional seat in Nebraska, add to 270. That blue wall after the next census will probably go to 255, 257 maybe. So, you're going to have to win a Georgia on a regular basis, or North Carolina, or an Arizona, or you got to bring a Florida in play. And I think the other piece of that is, I mean, listen, and I think, we've seen this with the Obama coalition, we saw it with Biden, we saw it with Trump. Like, I mean, good candidates can bring states in play. If I worry less about that. But on the congressional side, the reality is like, we're going to have to win 12 to 15 seats to get to back to even right now in states that Republicans control. In states Republicans are going to draw the lines. Like, I mean, like we can all bitch about it all day long. I mean, but it's just the reality. If you want to have a majority, like in 2032 in Florida, we're probably going to have to pick up 3 to 4 congressional seats under the new map that we're not going to draw. So the only way you do that is by having a broader coalition of better candidates, And so for me, the whole point of this survey is to begin hopefully a longer conversation about, again, like where I am in West North Carolina. This is a district that used to be represented by a Democrat. Heath Schuler was not in Congress that long ago. And,
Heath
you know,
Schuler, wow.
yeah, yeah. And, but maybe a decade ago. I mean, that's not that long ago in the
Right.
grand scheme of things. There are really good candidates here. Like, what does it take to take a seat like this and move it 3, 4, 5 points to the left so that, again, a guy like Zeb Smathers, who's an absolute fucking rock star, can go to Congress if he wants to from here, or a I-4 corridor in Florida, or suburban to Dallas and Houston. Like, these are the conversations we've got to have over the next 2 to 4 years, and that don't really matter what happened in 2026, or 2028. Like, we have to make these places more competitive. So the hope of this survey is to kind of begin to lay out what that pathway looks like for candidates going forward.
Okay, so just at the top, because I mean there is a lot of hard truth in this, but I think the one part that is not surprising off the top, Steve, is that frankly neither political party is very popular. They're both significantly underwater, and I think, as you note, 21% of respondents said they don't like either party. Right, so you've already got about a fifth of theoretically available voters who say, "I guess I'm up for grabs," or pox on both your houses. I want nothing to do with you. So you start there. Again, Democrats are more underwater than Republicans, but it's not a popularity contest. It's who's less popular. And
Yeah,
Democrats are marginally more unpopular or less popular than Republicans. Republicans aren't popular. It's not like they enjoy 54% of Americans across the board.
yeah. I think the two things to me that were just interesting off the top is, again, this is not a representative sample of the country. It's not even necessarily a representative sample of these states. It is of 21. And what's interesting is you like if you look at where we started in 2024 to where we are today, nothing's really changed. I mean, while Trump's approval has gone down nationally, it's about what it was in these places on election day. The generic vote is about what it is, what the Trump Harris vote was. And so, like, these places remain hyper competitive and hyper polarized. And you know, and but to your point, a fifth of voters are saying we don't like either one of you. The number one thing people said about both political parties, the number one word they associate with both political parties was corrupt. Like, I think the other thing I think folks need to keep in mind is, like, particularly Democrats who are frustrated, and I apologize if my internet's been a little screwy here, Western North Carolina, is
Sure.
is like some of this is probably not going to change till we have a nominee.
Mhm.
I mean, like, it's just like it's not going to get better till we have a nominee. And because the nominee becomes what the party is, and so it's gonna be a little clunky from here until then.
But Steve, let me push back on that a little bit, because that is probably true. But I would venture to say, at least as an observer, that a lot of the reason why the Democratic Party is in the places in is, yes, Republicans are unabashedly and unshamefacedly gerrymanders of the highest order, but also Democrats stopped competing in a lot of
Hundred
places.
percent. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was reading some comments on my Substack this morning, and a Republican, Brad Todd, who I think we both
Sure.
respect, made
Uh-huh.
a comment. He's like, "Why didn't you put your rural counties in here?" And I was like, "That's a good point. Like, we have huge rural problems. There's only so much we can pull." But yeah, there are huge places where we don't compete. And it's interesting, going back to our brief conversation at the beginning about the hurricane. You know, we may have talked about this in the first one. I don't remember, but when I came up here 3 days after Helene, and I remember sending an email to my friends in the White House, just being like, the misinformation here is so it's
Right.
you will not believe how bad it is. And but the problem is we have so little confidence, but voters have so little confidence in us or trust in us because we're not present here anymore. that they'll believe the misinformation over their own eyes. And
Right.
that's on us as much as it is on them. We just walked away from these people, and we wonder why they don't trust us anymore.
Yeah, well, and I just Nicole is saying something here, and Nicole, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. She said, "Let me push back on all of that. Rapists, pedophiles, cheaters, thieves vote Republican. Democrats know how to run the government out. Our great great grandparents created." Look, I know a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump. I'm upset about it. Um, I don't know that any of them are rapists, pedophiles, cheaters, or thieves. Um, and I think that there are a lot, and I think there's another piece of this survey just to put paid a little bit to that, Steve, too, which is that the Democratic Party, from my perspective, has as big a problem with its own base
Correct.
as it does with any independent voters. So
Yeah.
yeah, you can be upset about people voting for Republicans, but let's be very clear. There's a lot of Democrats who, when given the option, are saying, "Yeah, to hell with it."
Yeah, and listen, I think I mean, again, I'm proud of the work I did in 2020 to help elect President Biden. I admire him greatly as a human, and I think history will probably treat him pretty well. But if voters thought we'd improve their lives between 2020 and 2024, Donald Trump would not have won. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so, I think it's the work going forward is like I think, we see in this survey, voters want to see a more common sense Democratic Party. Common sense can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It's a word that came up a lot. When we went through sort of the exercise of framing, they want to see a new generation. New generation sometimes means young, sometimes it just means different. It wants us to be a party that embraces the American dream again, that stands up for families, for people that work with their hands as much as people that run corporations. I mean, I think there's just a lot of things that we used to be what we were as a party, what we were known as, that we've just, frankly, it's interesting when you go through the exercise where we gave voters like 40 words, basically told them to rank the top 5 words they associate with both political parties. The things that I thought of as the Democratic Party when I was a young operative, standing up for the middle class, fighting for working people, you know, being inclusive of diverse thoughts. Those things were ranked like in the bottom 20. You know, in words like woke and out of touch. That was ranked at the top, and like that's not my opinion. That's what the voters are telling us.
Well, and again, I think there's a couple of things. One, so I want to stick to this enthusiasm gap because Democratic deficit reflects relative lack of partisan enthusiasm. Republican Party 90% enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Democratic Party 78. Right, like that is a delta that equals losing.
Yeah.
Right, because in an environment where everyone is upset, where everyone is throwing their hands up, where everybody has their own thing to be angry about, if it becomes simply a base play, and remember that 2020 in 2022, Steve, it was only 44% of the electorate turned out for the midterm elections, right? So well below 50. In a base play, MAGA is able to get its people out better than the Democrats have been. And I've seen this personally. I know you've dealt with it for years.
Yeah. Again, you look at margins. What's interesting, I mean, if you take I'm going to butcher this number a little bit, but it's like 660 counties that are in the 10 states that we looked at. We pulled 21 counties out of that 660 counties in those 10 states. Republicans have improved their margins in 603 of them over the last 4 elections. And again, a lot of it is not when you add it up. It's just they've actually, to your point, in a lot of these suburban, exurban counties, our vote total has basically remained equal, and their vote total has gone up. They've just turning out more people than we are, and they're winning the fight over independence.
And again, I think some of this too in tell me how and I put we, I'm going to say we. And there's a lot of groups out there and most of them are not called the Democratic National Committee, right? Who have been out there doing get out the vote stuff and all that, but also voter registration in places. I was at a conference, I don't know, a couple of months ago, Steve, where it showed that, and I'm gonna get the years wrong, but the end result is the only thing that matters. Let's say 15 years ago, Democrats had a plus 13 voter registration advantage in key electoral college states. That's now -2. I mean, not to be too hard on you here, Steve, but that's just neglect. Right.
100%. I mean,
That's not like, oh my gosh, somehow all these people became more conservative. It's that somebody that was out there putting the money in, putting the boots on the ground, doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this in Florida all day long if you want, but which I won't do to folks. But but Pennsylvania is a great example. So, what Biden won Pennsylvania by a point and a half, Trump won Pennsylvania by a point and a half, something in that range. The model, the voter registration model in Pennsylvania got 4 points more Republican between
Right.
2020 and 2024. If Kamala Harris had essentially gotten the same vote share of independents, Republicans, and Democrats under the same vote model as Joe Biden had, she actually would have won by a larger margin. I
Yep.
mean, it was just the state moved 4 points more. The registration, the electorate was 4 points more Republican on election day in 2024 than it was in 2020, and it was entirely a function of voter reg.
Right. And again, this is where people we can talk about misinformation, disinformation, all of the stuff that you were talking about there in Asheville, but that keeps people fired up, right? There's a means the all of that insanity that we observe. We're not typically a part of, but we observe, Steve. There is a means that is a means to an end, which is to keep people fired up or to draw people in with a gravitational pull that's stronger than anything else. But I do want to say one thing here, that there is some good news, that common sense, competence, and trustworthiness most important to independence, and that's true of Republicans as well. And to me, I think one part of the fight that we're in and the fight we're going to be in, Steve, is that, this sounds counterintuitive. When you're in these places and you're fighting a Republican candidate, make it about the Republican candidate, what they've done, and the Republican Party and what they've done. If you invoke Trump, you give both that candidate something to hide behind, and you get a knee-jerk reaction from too many voters who say, well, they just blame Trump for everything. Now, look, Trump's done plenty of bad things. I get it, and he is responsible for a lot of them. But let's live in the world we're in, not the world we want to be in, which is, don't invoke him. Don't give them that ogre to hide behind, right?
Yeah,
The Republican Party is incompetent. The Republican Party is doing bad things. The Republican Party is bad for the working class, the rural, and people who put money away in their 401k and their IRA every day, right? Like, you don't need him. It seems weird because he's so big, but leave him out. You're a lot better off not invoking the mythological creature, right? You're like saying, what was that crazy movie where you look at, you look in the mirror and you say whatever it is 3 times? Like, don't say Trump, Trump, Trump. He'll show up.
yeah, I think that's right. I mean, somebody asked in the comments a minute ago, like, what is the Democratic brand? I mean, the problem is, I think if you were to ask voters right now, which is more important than what I think it is, voters
Right.
would say that the Democratic brand is entirely just fighting Trump. That's at its core what we are. And again, this is not. I'm not going to make. I'm not. I'm not endorsing Andy Bashir here, but I think Bashir is. There's real lessons in Andy Bashir, the guy that elected was won 3 times in a red state, a state that Trump won every single time because of 2 reasons. A, he was a competent governor who got real shit done for his people, and he
Right.
contrasted some of the insane ideas his opponents had with the actual results in that he had as governor. And he also was like willing to give people space to vote for Trump and to vote for him. He talked about he would often he would use faith and family to describe his opposition to certain Republican ideas. He didn't make it about Trump. He made it about how do we build a better state, a more inclusive state, a state that works for everybody here. And I think one of the reasons why I believe firmly that our next nominee will be a governor is because I think that governors are uniquely positioned. I mean, Josh Shapiro has done a great job of this. I
Yeah.
think Whitmer caught all kinds of shit online for working with Trump on some stuff, but like I'm sure it actually probably tested really well in Michigan. You know, and governors that can point to common sense things that they got done for their people and can contrast sort of having to work against Republican legislatures. I think that's a model, not what we're seeing out of Washington right now, which is just like screaming and yelling about everything. Like, I'm sorry, one last little rant here. Like, I am
Sure.
frustrated that our congressional members didn't offer an actual option to push back on the one big beautiful bill. Like, I would have loved to have seen Democrats in Congress be like, they're going to, those guys want to give $4 trillion in tax cuts to people who don't need it. Like, what we want to do is give $10,000 to everybody to help pay for the health insurance or anything, just like something to show that we stand for something that is common sense, not just, to your point, screaming about Trump every chance we get.
Well, but this is, I think, a big part of what you're talking about, and why I think why the enthusiasm sags, which is there is a belief and Steve, you and I are both part of consultant culture, which is let the house burn down, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Trump and the Republicans will be so unhappy, they'll have no choice but to vote for us. Wrong,
Yeah.
wrong,
Yeah.
because you're discounting what we talked about at the beginning in Asheville, which is the bad guys are really, really good at saying it's not our fault, it's their fault.
Yeah.
And to me, to your point, 2020, right, Steve? Without COVID, Trump wins a second term. So you
100%.
could, and look, I could not be more proud of having been part of an organization that helped Joe Biden win and defeat Donald Trump.
Yep.
2022, you could call, remember, Democrats didn't win in 2022. They did much better than anybody thought they would. But you
Right.
could put that up to the fall of Roe, right? It was a short-term 6-month aberration. It didn't last. It didn't last, right? And that's in an environment where you have to have, all sorts of compelling things, all sorts of compelling narratives. The storytelling, I think, really does matter in these things, but you have to tell people what you want to do. And my fear, right, is that too often it's that, it's the Hippocratic oath taken to its worst extreme. First, do no harm, which means the patient's on the table bleeding. Well, if we do something, he might die. Yes, but if you do nothing, he will certainly die.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I wrote about this in a piece I wrote a few weeks ago. Kind of my advice to Joe Biden, who again I admire immensely. I actually think in some ways probably the worst thing that happened to us for 2024 was 2022. I think 2022 gave a lot of people
Yes.
the opportunity to be like, oh, see, it's okay. Like, oh, we can lean into this stuff; it'll be fine. And what truth is, we did win a bunch of states by very narrow margins because of pushback around one thing. Um, but when that one thing wasn't the only thing that mattered anymore, that crumbled. And I think honestly, I think had we lost the House and the Senate in 2022 and had it gone sort of sideways in a more big way, it would have forced a conversation and a reckoning that might have made 2024 more possible. I also think it probably would. I think it may have moved the Biden conversation a lot earlier than we had to as well. But that's
Well, and as someone who wore a T-shirt that said "Democracy Defender" on it all over the
yeah,
place last fall, I think the other part is, I see a lot of the respondents here, which tended to be older, tended to be whiter, tended to be higher income and education attainment. That democracy is great because democracy works for them, right? Like
yeah,
democracy works for you and me, but the people for whom it doesn't work. Right. It's just what in Joe Trippi and I were down in your neck of the woods in Sarasota earlier this year.
yeah,
And Joe said something really smart. For too many people, democracy equals status quo.
yeah,
Right. We can't be for the status quo. And I think you said something that's really important, which is the fever is never going to break. Right, like we have metamorphosized into a new epoch, epoch, in American history, in American politics, in American life. Right, like what came before is never coming back. So the idea that's like, well, we have to return to democracy. People are like, that didn't work for me either. So you're
yeah.
telling me you want to go back to that? Like, why? Why would I go back to that?
Reed,
Because, go ahead.
yeah, I don't think we talked about this on the pod, but back in 2022, we did a United the Country survey, and at that point, kind of the 5 states that Trump had that Biden had won the Trump, so the 3 upper Midwestern plus Georgia, Arizona. And at the very end of the poll, I convinced our pollster to add one question, and she wouldn't do it unless it was literally after all the demographics. She didn't want to mess up anything else. It was basically
Right.
just a match pair. We said, America, piece one was American democracy has worked for 240 some odd years. There's a model in the nation. It's not always efficient, but it ensures sort of people have a voice. Yeah, whatever. Sort of the argument for democracy. And then the other pair was listen, I'm for democracy, but our current system of government does not work for people, and it needs radical sort of radical change. And what was interesting is it was about 60-40 against the traditional democracy argument. And it was strongest among non-college voters, not just white voters, non-college voters, Hispanics, Latinos, African Americans, younger voters, the folks that Trump did really well with. Not only do they not care about our democracy argument, a lot of them are willing to try something different. And that's the part that's truly terrifying.
Yeah, because look. if you, I mean, I use, and this is anecdotal, so take it for what it's worth. But if you take the neighborhood in Grand Rapids where I canvassed last October, and then match that with what I heard at a conference, 6 weeks ago. My life wasn't better under Obama. It wasn't worse under Trump, right?
Yeah.
Probably not better under Biden, not worse under Trump too, right? Like, or it's just a declining thing. You look out the window year in and year out, your lives don't change. Your communities get worse. If there's any massive change, Steve, it's gentrification. The house you lived in for a long time, you got to leave because they're going to put up McMansions or something, right? So I think that's the other part is getting down into these communities and understanding, the lived life, which is, I always use NATO as the example, right? Like NATO is a vanity issue. You only worry about NATO if you have time, money, security to worry about NATO, right? It's not something that comes up at the dinner table if you and your wife have had to work a couple of shifts each to make the rent and pay for food. That's just not what it is. So let me ask you this. So let's bring this back to reality. So, or to the closer to the present day, based on what you've seen here. CB said, Steve, September is when the budget bill deadline comes up, right? What will the game of chicken look like? I was talking to somebody about this. So what do you think is going to happen? Because the natural pull of Democratic leadership is to do anything but shut the government down. The demand of the Democratic base and voters will be, you take a stand. Because to vote for anything, right, is to ensconce 180 billion in ICE, 50 billion in Medicaid cuts, all the other things that came from that bill. So tell me, like, put your strategist hat on for a second, put your tactician hat on for a second. Like, what does Democratic leadership need to do? And I might get you in trouble, and I'm sorry, but that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a median voter guy, and I think every one of these crises, what was it? Rahm Emanuel said, "Don't waste a good crisis." Every one of these crises is an opportunity to define who we are as a party. And I think that, the challenge, I think, why did Hakeem Jeffries not have a true alternative to one big beautiful bill? It's probably because it's impossible to actually pull together a consensus within that caucus right now. My hope is, that we do pick two or three things that are truly meaningful and just lean hard into it. And if it means sort of driving the thing into a conversation over a shutdown, then it does. I mean, for example, like, I think that, all the stuff in one beautiful bill that's going to that people are really going to feel is the healthcare stuff. And it's not just the Medicaid stuff; it's the people who are on the exchanges. I mean, I was talking to you know, my brother-in-law yesterday, who does just fine. He and his wife buy their insurance on the exchange. They don't get tax subsidies, but their insurance is probably going to go up 20%, he thinks, just because people won't be able to afford Obamacare anymore because they cut the tax subsidies. Like, lean into that. Like, I mean, stuff like that. That's what I would do. I would find a couple of things that are really easy to understand and just drive into it. And, yeah, I mean, like, I think that, some of this is there's a level of kind of the house is going to burn down around itself. We've seen, for example, like we see in this poll, you ask people about immigration, like, who are you closer to on immigration? And it's a push because of all the ICE stuff. Now you ask people who they're close to on securing the border, and it's all about Trump. So, but I just think, again, like, the median voters are telling us that they want to see things that meaningfully change their life and make their life better and make their life easier, and they want to see government work again. And I think if we're going to shut the government down over stuff, we should shut it down over that stuff.
Well, and this is, you said two things that I want to touch on. One is, you couldn't get the caucus together. Your job is to get the caucus together, right? Like, that's your job. You got elected to do that. If you can't do that, then let somebody else do the job. Second, somebody like Schumer, who we saw back in March, right, capitulated. He found 9 other Senate Democrats to do that. I will not be surprised if that happens. I hope it doesn't. But at least put up a fight, which is, unless you take these things and take them out of the bill that you guys passed, right? Then, like, we're not going anywhere. And that, to me, is the other part of being the opposition, which, being the opposition in a time, if you claim that Trump is an existential threat to the republic, then you must oppose everything he and his party wants, right? Not just like, well, this is good policy, or, we're hearing from a lot of people, or like, well, donors dumped 25 or $30 million into us, so we got to be for it. No, like you have to oppose everything. And I think that's one part of what we're seeing out of leadership in Washington, D.C., Steve, is that they're just unwilling to accept the world as it is, as opposed to the world that they still think they can somehow navigate, which they keep running into the rocks.
Yeah, and I mean that's the I think the point of this survey is like, we didn't do this because it's like dump on Democrats time. I think what we wanted to do was find a way to get a real temperature check on how voters view us and view them. And what's interesting, Reed, we haven't talked about it, but like I mentioned in the little memo I wrote, I mean, voters don't like Republicans either. Like it's
Right.
not like I mean, like when the words they use to describe Republicans aren't great. Now, I mean, the place where the challenge is that they're more likely to use words like common sense and competence to describe Republicans and Democrats. But like the first things they think of when they think of Republicans are just as awful, if not more awful, than what they think of us. and so,
Mm.
and so, and I think again that's why I think that and we saw also I think we didn't mention this earlier. What was the favorability of Washington politicians was like 9 to 90. I mean, it's just
Right.
will just I think that's why I think the more we can frame this thing as a making Trump what he is, a creature of Washington, make Republicans what they are, the majority in Washington. They are defending themselves and their status quo, and like let us be the party that's out there fighting to make lives better for people every single day.
Well, and it's interesting you bring up Trump as a creature of Washington, because this is what we need our friends and our allies and our leaders to do this, which is you have to walk, chew gum, and read a book at the same time, right? Like you have to be able to operate in a multidimensional system, which is, for me, just to bring in this Epstein thing for a second. I don't want to talk about it for more than a couple of minutes. Is the thing that the crisis it creates electorally for Republicans, Steve, is that it makes Trump just like everybody else, right? He's just another rich guy. He's just another politician. He's just another part of the deep state who's going to help everybody get away with it. And he was not supposed to be that. And that's my opinion, is what's causing the cognitive dissonance among his base. And so as you're going through this, now is the time. Again, you don't have to say anything other than Trump is just like the rest of them. Trump is just like the rest of them. Trump is just like the rest of them. Convince them that for them, it doesn't matter, right? Because these people, a lot of them showed up just for him or something like him. If he's just as bad as everybody else, they'll go back to where they came from. And I'm not talking about like, oh, the high-minded ideals of democracy and, blah. I'm like, how do we win an election? And if
Yeah.
we can get 5 or 6% of MAGA to stay home because they are as bad as the Democrats, they are part of the uniparty. He wasn't what he promised me. Fine, I'll take it.
It's interesting. I mean, we may have talked about it before, Reed, but I was, after the 2016 election, I was in the camp of people that thought that Donald Trump won for the same reason that Barack Obama won, and it was really people that voted for Obama twice that flipped over enough of them to vote for Trump. And there was some research done on our side after the election that really kind of paired that out. That voters viewed they could separate Trump's politics and Obama's politics, and what they liked about both of them was that they thought they both were going to take on the status quo in Washington. And so,
Mhm.
to your point, if you take that away from Trump and the Republicans, he doesn't have anything at all. I mean, the thing that Obama was able to maintain through his entire presidency, even among people who didn't like him when he got it into the low 40s in approval, they thought he was still fighting against Washington. And that's the thing that Trump, again, you take that away from Trump. I think the Epstein thing is a great example of that. And again, you go back to like I mean, one of the Epstein thing. I don't want to dive into it, but you have sorry, somebody called me here. Is um, you know 38% of voters use the word corrupt to describe Democrats. 44% use it to describe Republicans. Like they think it's a pox on both of their houses right now, and this just plays right into that mindset.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up corruption as we got a few minutes left, because I was meeting with a donor a few months ago, and he was asking me about how I felt about the Democratic Party, and I didn't think I was being that expressive, but he's like, "You just have a lot of bile," And I said, look, there's no question. Like the Republican Party needs to be burned to the ground, and this is the one I grew up with. I said, to me, my biggest frustration and perhaps disappointment, Steve, is that I thought Democrats were better, and in too many cases, they're not. And this is what I've said before. If you're going to be the white hats, you got to be the white hats. If you're going to be the party that says we do it for you, then you have to do it for the people, which means you got to get rid of all the special interest goodies, and you got to piss off some of your lobbyist friends, and you have to put out stuff like, you know what, we're putting in we're suggesting a lobbying ban. Piss off K Street. Like, who's going to be offended by that? K Street? Right? Big business. And you have to kill some sacred beltway cows. And I think that there's too many people with entrenched interests who still think, well, we're not in charge, but I've still got my little slice of the world. So as long as I've got my little slice of the world, I can go to I can go to Georgetown, and I can go to the clubs, and I can, hobnob and all this other stuff. Like, it'll be fine. Like, it will be fine for you. It won't be fine for anybody else. And then that's where, like, you have yet the next crisis, whatever it is, and the torches and the pitchforks show up. Right. And then the thing spins completely out of control. And so to me, I would be anti-corruption. I'd be anti-corruption all day, every day.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, I did Gwen Graham when she ran for Congress in North Florida about 8, 10 years ago, won a district that Trump had, or that was like +7, +8 Republican. And what we found, like, how do we break that thing? I mean, obviously she had a great name for Florida, but she ran against not she ran like, we're not going to pay members of Congress when the government shuts down. Like, that we're going to have a
Right.
permanent lifetime ban. She said she was going to vote against Nancy Pelosi, not because she didn't like Pelosi, but because she just felt we needed new leaders. And like, those are the kind, she ran against she beat a Republican because she's like, that guy voted with his party 99% of the time. Like, nobody wants to elect a robot. And yeah, I mean, I think you have to sort of lean into that stuff a little bit more. And for me, man, like, I'm just like, I'm a hack, and like, as I get older, I'm even more of a hack. And for me, it's basic math. Like,
Yeah.
what gets you to 50%? Like, I can be agnostic about a lot of shit if that agnostic gets me to 50%, because I know one thing. If I send a guy to Washington or a woman to Washington who has my party label next to it, they might agree with me. They might disagree with me 20% of the time, but I'm going to get more what I want from that person than if I vote for somebody else. Like, all the people that got mad about Manchin, like, wouldn't you love to have Manchin in the U.S. Senate right now? Absolutely. Like, I mean, like, it's not
You're
even
going
a
to make
choice.
these comments go crazy right now. I can
You know,
promise you.
and
There are people who are about to start throwing their phones and their laptops against the wall, Steve.
but like, if you could take Joe Manchin or you could take what's there now, like, it's not a choice. And I think that we have to get there as a party to be okay with that. Like, that's what getting to 50% in a lot of these places look like. And
Right.
and it's not going to look the same everywhere. Like, Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey and the Mandami guy in New York, not the same at all. They both kind of won though on the same argument from very, very different places, and we have to be okay with that.
Yeah, and I think about when you talk about that, I think back to the great movie, but it was great based on a better book called Charlie Wilson's War.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Charlie Wilson was a blue dog Democrat from East Texas. Right. What did he said? They want to be left. My voters care about God, guns, and being left alone. Right.
100%.
And that's it. That's the old, like, his people in Texarkana, Tyler, wherever the hell he was from, Longview, right? Like, that's what they cared about. Those were their values, and those were the values he represented. And to your point, like, I mean, this is a longer discussion, but the parties have sorted so much, right? That there are not enough blue dog Democrats. There's not enough Rockefeller Republicans. And the system in many places, Steve, as you know, and this is part of the thing we're discussing, is it just the system doesn't allow for it in too many places. But that also means, like, we just like Alexis Coe, who's a great presidential historian. She said this when we did one of these things. She said, the arc of history might bend toward justice, but it doesn't do it by itself, right? Like, you got to jump on the arc and make
Yeah,
it move.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
all
and
right, Steve,
and
go
again, just
ahead.
the last point of that, like, but the point of that, like, the blue, the blue dog people get worked up. The point is, like, again, go back to the 2032 problem. Go back to the whole point of this research. Like, we have to win in more places that we're not winning, that are in places that we may not even get to choose where the lines are. Like, I mean, from a survival perspective, like, we're probably gonna have to win 3 or 4 seats in Texas. We're gonna have to win 3 or 4 in Florida. We're gonna have to win another
Right.
seat in Georgia, North Carolina, other one in Arizona. There'll be a seat in Utah. Like, these are places we have to figure out how to win. And we have to be okay with the fact that the model that wins there may not be the same as the model that wins in New Hampshire, and that's okay.
Well, and I'm sorry, I'm going to steal a few extra minutes from you, Steve, because you just said something, which is, and I heard somebody, I don't remember who it was, but I heard somebody on the radio, it might have been yesterday, saying, for Texas to do another gerrymander, they're going to have to take a bunch of plus 10 Republican districts
Correct.
and make them plus 5 Republican districts.
Correct.
So don't look at it look at it as dirty pool. Also look at it as an opportunity to say, okay, where are those districts?
Correct.
Who are they? Because
Correct.
plus 10, okay, make an argument. Yeah, you throw a flyer, you get lucky once every 25 years. Plus 5? Well, wait a second. That's doable. That's not easy, but it's doable. And especially because, as we talk about, if you bring in competence, corruption, normalcy, Steve, and this is like, I live here in Utah, right? I want to run a candidate against every state rep and state house, Senate Republican here, which is most of them, right? There's not going to be any issues, right? It's going to be, these people don't care about you. They're completely corrupted by developers and big money, and they don't care what you think, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I'm going to say, right?
Yeah.
Am I going to win any of them? I don't know. But you know what? Like, I could tell you that here in Utah, those state reps and state senators are not prepared for that race. You know why? Because they're lazy, they're fat, they're happy, they're entitled. Use that against them. A lot of these people, again, 71% of races in 2024 went unopposed. In 75% of those, it was a Democrat who didn't participate. Guys, we must have candidates. We must find the best candidate available. That's not always going to mean the best candidate in history, but the best candidate available for these places, and start to compete. When you compete, you will win, even if it's 1 out of 100. You've shown that it can be done. You've now given someone else, Steve, like, who was like, maybe I should, I'm really interested in the school board. I'm really interested in city council, but I don't know. But then that person sees that and like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it too. And this stuff is out there. It's available, right? But this is the part of politics too that you and I came up in, which is, it's a lot of freaking work.
Yeah.
Politics is a lot of freaking work. It doesn't get easier. When you get elected, we think back to that great movie, The Candidate, with Robert Redford and Peter Boyle. They win and he looks at Peter Boyle and goes, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Oh man.
All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining me. Before I let you get out of here and get back to your nieces and nephews, where can we find you on Substack, and where else can we find your work?
So I'm on Twitter probably as much as anything, just Steve Schale at Twitter. On Substack, they wouldn't let me do Florida Man, so I'm Man of Florida at Substack, and then Facebook, Instagram, kind of all Steve Schale. But no, I appreciate it. I'm gonna write some more on this poll again. It was fascinating. I mean, the crosstabs are over 1,500 pages long because there was so much data. It's kind of what I wrote just touched the surface, as you know, from reading the deck, and we're happy to get on and talk some more about it a little bit down the road.
Perfect. As always, gang, please follow Steve and me here on Substack at The Homefront. You can also find me on Twitter, says.us, Blue Sky, TikTok at Reed Galen, Threads, and Instagram at Reed_Galen USA. Steve Schale, thanks for joining me.
Take care, Reed. Always good talking to you, brother.
Everybody else, we'll see you next time.